afternoon, everybody. If I could have your attention, please. So my name is Lauren Kidder. I'm one of the passport coordinators this semester. So I will go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. So Brian Franklin is the leader of Weinstein Spira's audit practice and combines a far-ranging field of expertise with a flair for business. After graduating from Lamar University, Brian worked in commercial audit division of Arthur Andersen, where he acquired a solid knowledge of manufacturing, real estate, hospitality, distribution, oil field services, and has developed a keen understanding of complex business issues and specific challenges of each industry. He is just as comfortable talking to a company and advising business owners on compensation structures, and he is just as able to relate to MIT graduates as he is a blue-collar employee at a manufacturing facility. Diplomatic, flexible, and highly analytical, Brian loves to synthesize large amounts of information into workable solutions that benefit his clients. He actively participates in all aspects of the firm's business, from recruiting and administration to marketing and production. Brian joined Weinstein Spira as a shareholder in 2002. He and his wife Janet are the guardians of Jack Russell Terriers Zen and Savvy. Brian is part owner of Deerfield Ranch Winery and is a certified specialist in wine. He also owns 3 scaled replicas of 19th century cannons that are in perfect working order. That is totally awesome, but I was out that. So please help me in welcoming Brian Franklin.
Thanks guys, thanks for your time. Thanks for being on time. I'm actually kind of impressed this many of you hours are actually on time, so I guess hopefully I'll live up to that. And yes, I do come armed with a cannon. So this is a workshop, so it's pretty informal. It's not a classroom setting like you may be used to. What that means is you can fire questions as they go. We can debate things. There are going to be some breakout deals. In fact, most of this is going to be breakout deals, so you're probably going to end up clustering in groups because I'm going to ask you guys to do that and talk about different scenarios and different situations, and then what are the possible outcomes. So again, I'm a Lamar grad, and I was doing the same thing you guys are doing in this very room actually a long time ago, but still it's the same idea. And I'm curious who I'm talking to exactly, other than you guys are going to Lamar. Are all of y'all, is anyone not a business major? Okay, I got a couple. Where are y'all? Awesome, I'm really impressed and intimidated. Okay. All right, and then how many of y'all are freshmen? Got a couple? All right. Sophomores? Okay, the vast majority, I'd say. Juniors? Okay, actually the real vast majority. And then seniors. Okay. And then how many of y'all are accounting majors? Oh, cool. I love you. So, anyway. So I'm an accounting graduate, got a bachelor's. I'm the current chair of the Lamar University Accounting and Business Law Advisory Board. That's a lot to say. But what we are, we're a group primarily of alums that help advise the accounting and B-law department specifically about matters. We talk to them about some of the core curriculum. Is what the students getting what we need in the real world. We talk about the direction certain programs are going. We help some funding of that department specifically, helping the faculty do some of their special projects. We also help fund some of the paid off Honor Society, for instance, did do some of its things. And then we also interface directly with students, kind of like what I'm doing right now. The idea being that, hey, you know, there's not a whole lot of difference between a student and working in the real world other than a degree and a little bit of time. And so we're trying to help you guys get acclimated, tell you a little bit more about what's out there, and kind of be more prepared to compete against other schools and other people in the workforce once you're out there working. So like I said, today's topic specifically is ethics. And ethics is one of those kind of squishy sounding things, but in reality it comes up fairly often. And when it does, it has some pretty profound implications sometimes. Can be life-changing even. So it sounds like a soft topic, but in reality, it can be a pretty big deal. So she mentioned in my bio, after I graduated, I went to work for a firm called Arthur Andersen. How many of you guys have even heard of that firm now? Okay, so it's in a few textbooks. And there was this other company called Enron. How many of you guys have heard of that one? Okay, good, better. Okay, well, I left Arthur Andersen in 2002. It wasn't necessarily my idea to leave, but I didn't have much of a choice because Andersen itself was going under. And the reason why it was going under was because of this company called Enron. And Enron did some unethical things. Not the whole company, just a few individuals within that company. But because those few individuals made those unethical decisions, it pretty much tanked Enron and all of its employees and all their savings, because a lot of people had their life savings in Enron stock, which you can argue that was wise, but it was true, they did. And it also wiped out a bunch of other people, namely my firm, which is another 80,000 people that all lost their jobs too. So I was directly affected by these guys' decision to do some of these things. I couldn't even spell Enron. It wasn't on the account, you know. I personally didn't see anything going on, but it doesn't matter. What a few people did had wide-ranging implications. Effectively affected everybody because the stock market itself had some hits because of this. So that was a decision that had some wide-ranging consequences, an ethical decision that could really do that to you. So after Enron went down, and Weinstein went down, Anderson went down, I went to Weinstein Spira. And so Weinstein Spira, I'll just talk a little bit about this. This is another kind of thing that we do with students, is to tell you a little bit about the accounting world. Only a few of you guys are actually accounting majors, but I'll just tell you a little bit about the landscape. So Arthur Andersen was amongst what at the time was called the Big Eight. Now it's the Big Four through various means and acquisitions. There's only 4 large, big international firms out there. And then there's the smaller firms like you guys see primarily like in the Beaumont, the local firms that are here. And then there's firms like mine, which are called mid-market firms. So a mid-market firm is just what it sounds. We're in between. So we're not a huge firm, we're not a small firm, we're something in between. We primarily work with private companies as opposed to big public companies, but the ones we do work with do tend to be on the larger side. So, okay, so this is just a little bit, it's a little bit about our firm, but also just a little bit about what mid-market is. So mid-market means we're diversified. Audit and tax are the 2 things you hear about the most, and that's what your school's going to be about, but also business and management. We get into estate planning and private advisory. And like I said, primarily we're dealing with private companies as opposed to public companies, but ours tend to be on the bigger side. We have a lot of international business, a lot of inbound, a lot of outbound, lots of different industries. And just a little bit about us. We're about 75 people, just to give you some idea of the size of a firm like mine. We have a thing called the rotation program. What that means is, again, some of the underclassmen haven't been exposed to it, or the non-accounting majors, but you hear about audit and tax a lot, and typically you're expected to go in one or the other. We don't ask people to do that, actually. Our interns get to do both in the same internship, and our full-timers get that opportunity as well. So it's something that we do. It's a little different. Flexible work time, given where we are. We've got core hours of 9 to 3. Beyond that, you come and go as you will. We just expect people to work 8. We have an overtime bank, which means that if you do work overtime, you get paid in one of 2 ways. You get paid in cash, or you get paid in time. And some people prefer to have more time off than more cash, and so they can accumulate substantial weeks of vacation. So it works out well for everybody. Telecommuting, we do offer everybody to get work from home 1 day a week, which is a new trend nowadays, the recognition of commutes and that sort of thing. You don't always have to be in the office, you can do things remotely. Everybody has home office setups at where they live, and so you can wake up and be in your pajamas and put a day's work in. Free parking, fun and grade. Every week we do some sort of crazy activity. We do a lot with the community. I'm personally on 5 nonprofit boards, which is pretty busy, but it makes you feel like you're giving back. And then open door policy. So just a little bit about us. It's not so much an advertising, it's just an idea of what is going out there in the world. Because a lot of firms are offering these kinds of flexibility. The good news is you guys are coming into a pretty hot job market, so you have a lot more leverage, and companies are being more proactive with their people, giving them more opportunities, more things to do. So, okay, so now, a little bit about ethics itself. So, I always hate when people do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. What is the definition of ethics? Sounds kind of canned, but it is a little bit, but otherwise what are we talking about? So it is moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. In other words, it's like, what do I do? Another time you may have heard it called doing the right thing when no one's looking. Because it's true, sometimes the decisions get made without really there being any sort of public knowledge of your own dilemma, what's happening. Sometimes that's not true though. Sometimes you're actually on great public display and you've got to make a call. And you've got to decide, what's right and what's wrong. What are my value systems? What are the universal value systems that are out there? Because these consequences can be profound. I mean, like the Enron deal, that was a huge thing. It affected literally maybe millions of people, cost billions of dollars. Other decisions could be very mundane, small, that sort of thing. But remember, sometimes little decisions kind of add up. There's this thing called the slippery slope you may have heard about. It's a real thing. Because, you do something one time, you get away with it, there really were no consequences. Okay, well, the next time that comes along, you're more likely to do it again because there were no consequences. But maybe over time, that develops a pattern where there really are some consequences one day. And so a lot of things you hear about with fraud and that sort of thing, that's often how it starts. It starts up small and starts up with good intentions. They're not intentionally being bad people. They just, I need to get some money, and they got away with it. And because they got away with it, they know they can get away with it again. The next time they do it again, except this time it's bigger. And this time maybe they intended to pay it back, but they didn't quite pay it back this time. And it rolls and it rolls and it rolls, and somebody's in prison. And they weren't necessarily bad people. They weren't going to rob a bank, but they started off by justifying to themselves that it was okay. And so that's kind of an ethical dilemma that you get yourself into sometimes. And so we're not going to talk too much about fraud today, but it's kind of the flip side of some of these kinds of discussions. And so as a CPA, myself and my firm, we're obligated to go through some pretty extensive ethics training literally every 2 years, because sometimes the accountants are the gatekeepers, right? We're talking to people about their tax returns and their positions. I'm an auditor, so it's a similar kind of thing with financial statements. My clients are doing things, I've got to sometimes hold them to a standard. And so we have to be held to a standard ourselves. And so we're also having to make sure we remember what the standards are. And that's in a professional setting. But ethics is more than just professional. It's just an outgrowth of what's the right thing to do. And so a lot of times that's in a personal setting too. And that's a question we'll talk about in a little bit. Can you separate the two? Can you be, professionally ethical? Yes, but personally you're a wreck. Or can it be the other way around? Professionally you're doing all kinds of stuff, but personally you're going to church every day, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit too. And then we're going to use this in some scenarios to decide, what do you think is the right way to go? And like I said, people are going to have different opinions about this, and it's not necessarily always black and white, and you're not necessarily a bad person for doing one versus the other either. So first though, let's go through these real quick. What is an ethical issue? Because do you even know one when you see one? I mean, we'll put some scenarios up so we have an ethical issue here, but on a day-to-day basis and in your everyday life, do you even see one when it's coming up? Sometimes maybe it's obvious, but no, sometimes it's not. And that gets back to individuals' value systems as to what they think is a problem in the first place. And that's why we have whistleblower programs and all this other stuff, because some people think something's an issue, so other people may not. But figuring out that you're not flying blind and even thinking about it first is the first step. Do I even have an ethical issue, or do I identify a potential ethical issue? Even if maybe you don't think personally it is a problem, but you have to think, well, is it potentially a problem from another point of view or from a third party's eyes? And second thing, determine who's affected in their rights. So again, it's more to it than it sounds. You think, well, okay, it's me. It's my right or my issue. Well, is it though? Maybe it's you and a counterparty, or someone else better or worse off because of this. Or maybe it's neither of you, but it's actually a third party. Maybe it's the general public. Maybe it's just morals in general. So it's not always going to be black and white, and it's to say, who is it? So you got to think about it a little bit. It's like, well, who's affected by this? Does it really matter? Oh, no one cares. No one's going to look. Maybe, but maybe not. So think about that. And then, given their rights, who's your most important? Besides yourself, necessarily. Oh, yeah, number one, right? But maybe not. Maybe number one's benefited a little bit, but it's at the cost of someone else. That's a much bigger deal to them, or their impact's much more profound. So think about the impacts on the other parties as well, even the third parties, perhaps, potentially. Talk about alternatives. So alternatives aren't always black and white either. It's not just yes or no, or do it or don't do it. Sometimes there's other ways to think about it. Sometimes there's more complexity to that. Because maybe you can see, well, both are okay to some degree, but maybe there's a third way to go, or maybe there's a weighting of things. It's not always necessarily as easy as saying I do it or I don't do it. You know, and no human is perfect, right? We all have our lines, and we have degrees of what's great and what's not great. So you have to figure out, though, what's the general standard and how does it affect other people. And then determine the likely consequences of these different courses. In other words, if I do this, what's likely to happen? And if I do that, what's likely to happen? And if I do nothing, what's likely to happen? Sometimes nothing is an option, sometimes nothing is not an option. So going through and thinking about ahead, what could happen? And then assess the possible consequences. So in other words, I could do this, or I could do that, or I could do that. So think about all three of them. And then figure out, for instance, well, if I do this, the greatest number of people get the greatest benefit, as opposed to one person getting a lot of benefit. Maybe that's the way to look at it. Or maybe you say, well, what was it, the old Star Trek thing? The needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many, right? So that's a real thing. And so I have to think about it. Well, it's great for that person, but it hurts all these other people. And so is it weighed enough to balance it out? And so that's a decision. It's not always black and white. But you have to think that through. And then finally, do something. Take an action. Like I said, sometimes doing nothing is an option, but more often than not, it's not. Because choosing to let an ethical dilemma go by essentially accepts that proposition, right? So that is an action in its own sense. So anyway, any questions so far? A little lecture, a little, okay. Anyway, you're not gonna get the luxury of being quiet the whole time, so I'm gonna force you guys to talk a little bit. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna break down some scenarios. We're gonna talk through them, and I want y'all to group whatever you think is logical. Friends is fine, or groups of 6 or 7. And then what I'm gonna do, we're gonna throw some stuff up. I want y'all to debate it, and then we're gonna talk through, all right, well, what's the right thing to do? Or what should I do? Or what if this happened, what would happen next? And maybe why is this the right thing to do? Not just, that's it, but why? What are you thinking about it, right? And like I said, it's not always gonna be black and white. These are not necessarily easy things. That's why they're called dilemmas. They work for a large oil and gas company. So they award bids to vendors based on the lowest bid received. That's the rule, right? So whoever's got the lowest bid, that's who we're gonna give the work to. So after being awarded several large contracts, the vendor that got the work took the manager and his wife to this all-expense 5-day trip to the Bahamas. Not currently, because it's not such a great idea, but before the storm. So now you're the VP, you're the boss of that purchasing manager. And then you find out about this trip. So this guy works for you. His job is to make sure the company gets the best deals from its vendors. And then you find out that one of the vendors is taking him on this big expensive trip with him and his wife on a separate basis entirely. So what do you do? So let's talk about it for just a few minutes. Don't just throw an answer out. Sometimes it's not as obvious as it sounds. So can we figure out a way to break up? So maybe just do it by row. Might be the easiest way to do this. So let's just talk for a few minutes about this. So every row, just start talking, and then I'll break it in a few minutes, and then we'll argue about it. So, all right? Oh, let's see. Since the guy's looking at his phone, I'm think on you. So what do you think? What would you do? No, the guy right behind. You were looking at your phone too.
It's an everyday thing. You do what you have to do to get a job. It's not very ethical.
So, but you're the VP, so you're the guy's boss. What's that?
I would be happy.
Wouldn't be happy, right? So why not? Why aren't you happy?
Because that guy just spent money that wasn't supposed to be spent.
Well, maybe the vendor's the one who paid for it. They're the one taking him on this trip. So you're thinking, well, got the lowest bid. Why do I care what he did? It's one way to look at it. If it's a company policy or not, we don't say, do we? So is that right or wrong? What do you think?
Well, the question is, you have to ask, was that something that he knew about when he made the contract? Because if that's proposed after the contract and there's no foul play, then there's nothing wrong with it. But if that was the grounds for getting the lowest bid or for signing that contract, then it's unethical.
Could be. Could be a form of bribe, right?
Could be bribery.
Could be. Maybe the purchasing manager was telling this guy what he needed to know to make the bid in the first place. And maybe he does that all the time. So maybe the company's not really getting what they think they're getting.
Could be.
So, what do you think?
Me?
No, actually, the blonde lady, yeah, you.
Similar to what you said, and like, we're not missing information, but it could be bribery, but it just depends on, did you make the decision based on the best for the company, or did you know it in advance? So kind of same.
Okay. Again, these are intentionally a little vague, right? So I'm trying to make these not black and white. Well, it's obvious. Yeah, fire the guy, right? Well, maybe not, right? Maybe it's okay because he did do the best by the company. He got the best deal. Maybe when he's doing it, this came up later, and so really it wasn't that big a deal. So you need some context. That's true, and maybe there's a company policy, maybe there's not. It's not stated in here, right? But you have to think about it. And so if you're the VP and the guy did it, and you didn't think it was right, you could fire him maybe. Maybe you don't have the grounds though. Or maybe you tell him, hey, that's not cool, we need a policy. We just don't do that because it could put us on this path to where we are set up for bribes down the road, right? Or then you wanna find out, is this happening all the time? Has this been going on with this vendor? Certainly worth looking into. But, like I said, it's not always, oh yeah, it's obvious you gotta fire the guy, right? Maybe yes, maybe so, but not necessarily. And so that's why it demands a little bit more debate, a little bit more discussion about what do you look at. And if you're the purchasing manager, is what they did unethical? Do y'all think in general that's unethical to take money from a vendor after the fact, maybe? Does it matter if it was discussed before he offered the bid?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, probably. In a governmental setting, that's a crime, so.
I think it also matters how it looks to the other vendors who didn't get the bid. Even if there was not any unethical happenings, what does it look like?
Exactly. Well, and let's just say it's rigged, right? Let's say, yeah, they came in 3 cents under, so they're technically the lowest, but maybe their quality's crappy, Maybe they're really not a good vendor.
Right, that's what I was thinking. Is the lowest bid actually the best bid for the company?
Right.
Like maybe, cause they do have vendors and bidders that just come in and just give you the lowest bid just to try to get your business. But is it best for the company?
That's right. Or is it a bait and switch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the bid, but as soon as there's any little thing, we'll find some excuse to charge more, right? And the guy knows this. That's why he's in the Bahamas. So, anyway, that's where we're headed with some of these kind of things. And this is a professional setting, right? But they're not always gonna be professional. Sometimes they're personal. And so is it the same rules? When I'm at office or I'm working, do I have a different set of ethics than I do when I'm at the house? So, we'll talk about that too. Okay, here's another one. So you're the chairman of this big company, and you're ready to promote somebody, and it's based on the performance of this person. They've been with you for 8 years. 8 years of good service, right? Been doing a lot for this company. But now you got a new HR director, and they put a policy in of checking resumes, and lo and behold, this person's been working for you all this time, really doesn't have the degree she said she did. She's been fibbing the whole time, and I guess back when you hired her, you didn't really check. So this whole time, she doesn't have the credentials that they require to even get the job in the first place. But now they've been doing the job. So what do? You promote them anyway, even though they lied to you basically, right on the face of it? Do you not promote them and keep them? Or do you fire them altogether? So you're the chairman of the company. This is an important person. They've been with you 8 years. They're doing a good job, and you think they're the best person to promote. But lo and behold, they kind of lied to you all along, right? Because they were a fraud coming into the company in the first place. You probably didn't actually qualified to get the job they got, even though now they're doing a pretty good job. But now you're talking about promoting them again, but now everybody in the company knows, or will find out. So what do you do?
Promote.
Gentleman in the back.
So, he said fire, and the reason he said to do that is because it's, you set the precedent for the rest of your organization. And so if you let them get away with it, you may have other people trying to get dishonest, to get promotions, so we said to set an example and get rid of it.
Certainly see that point of view, right? Because, you know, like exactly what you just said.
We said to, or at least I did, we said to retain her, but in order for her to keep her employment, she has to go back and finish those last 21 hours. Because over 8 years with that level of performance, that's something you can't just disregard.
Okay? Got any other ideas? What about you?
We had pretty much the same consensus table.
Okay, don't promote her, but don't fire her either.
Yeah. And make sure she goes back.
And actually gets the degree?
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe even rock her up for that. That way we've actually done something.
okay. And again, you know, there's a lot of unknowns here, right? We don't know if if this was a faculty member, for instance, there's no way, she's out of here. Absolutely, because now you're worried about your credentials, you're worried about people's own educational standards. But
So we said to promote her because it's actually our fault that she got by us. If somebody lies on a resume for an application and you don't find it, that's really your fault. So we said that. Also, she did perform really well for 8 years. So to say that she was underqualified, does a degree make her more qualified? I don't think so. And we proposed to pay for the last 21 hours of her MBA if we want her, and she's performed, then we should keep her.
so you're gonna forgive, you even let her pay her to finish.
I think it's hard to, you can find
He's gonna fire her. And these guys say, well, we're not gonna fire you, but I'm gonna write you up and you gotta go finish. So, right, the 3 different outcomes, right? 3 different possible outcomes, right? And of course, you know how that affects that person, right? But like you said, how does it affect everybody else in that company? You know, does that say, okay, I can get away with it? Does that say, oh, well, it's shame on me, I missed it, but what else did I miss? And you also say, well, what else did she lie about, right? Maybe she just did that and was just a white lie, you know, just to get in the door, but maybe that's just the way she operates. That's just her personal ethics. And so that was just one of many decisions she's made. And you find out over time, yeah, there's a lot more to this. So, yeah, in a risk-free world, you'd fire the person because you don't have any other choice. And they definitely they lied to you right on the face of the resume, right? So there's really no going back on that. Most companies would probably take that route. But it was a small company, they're critical to the business. Maybe you look the other way, right? You know, maybe you say, well, don't do it again. It's not necessarily right or wrong, but you have to make decisions and you have to think about how does it affect other people. How does it affect the other employees there, for instance? Depending on the environment, you know, if it was an educational environment, how does it affect the product that the people are getting? You know, if there's other criteria, maybe this person jumped over somebody else to get the job because of that, fraudulently, right? So there's someone else in the company that now didn't get that job that they had in the first place. They're not happy. So maybe you set yourself up for a lawsuit, you know, by promoting them. So a lot of things, a lot of different outcomes that can happen. So it's not just the likely things, it's the other things you got to think about too. So, but it's not always an easy choice, right? Because it's a good person, they're getting it done for you. You let that person walk over an ethical thing. Sometimes it's, you know, hard. So, okay. This is all be fun. Okay, now we're in the personal realm for sure. Maybe you can even relate to this. You and the leasing manager work a deal back in December, and that lease actually starts kicking in. All of a sudden, there's a credit showing up. So there's some sort of credit that you didn't talk about that you're getting. So should you bring it up? Should you tell the manager? So this is totally personal, right? So what would you do? This could actually happen. Maybe it has happened to somebody in this room. So one more time. Let's go for a couple minutes and say, all right, This thing's showing up, it's the first month. Do I fess up or not? Maybe I'm right to make a quick decision. Right? Let's use the framework this time though. So what's the ethical issue? Is it obvious? What's the issue?
Well, the ethical issue is like, you're not getting charged like the person might be agreed upon, so you can either be honest or you could have a little more money in your pocket.
Pretty much, maybe, yeah. So who's the affected parties? Who's affected by this?
I'm affected, I'm getting $200 more, and the person that is the leasing manager is affected. Possibly other people in the apartment complex are affected if they find out that your bill is $200 less than theirs.
It's also the company that owns the lease, the place, which maybe it's some big faceless corporation in New York we don't care about. Maybe it's a mom and pop thing. Well, that's a big part of their own income because it's their landlord, right? Their personal landlord. You know, we said it was a leasing manager apartment complex, but maybe it's just 2 units, right? And it's really somebody's livelihood we're talking about. We don't, you know, there's no context here, but could be, right? Maybe you feel differently if that's the case. All right, so who's got the most important rights? That's a big one, right? Is it more important for you to save some money? Is it more important for the landlord to get paid what they're supposed to be getting? Is it more important for the manager to not get in trouble? Because they'll probably get in trouble eventually, right? Maybe the manager ends up paying that $200 out of their own paycheck. You don't know, but it's possible. That's how some of these places work. What are the alternative courses of action? Is there just one course of action? Is there more than one course? What can you do besides just fess up? You can wait 6 months and fess up, right? You can offer to split the difference, maybe. You know, there's more than one necessarily way to do this besides just immediately call them and say it's here. Maybe you get a reward. You know, maybe it's a system-wide thing, and it's happening to all the tenants, and all of a sudden you're saving them all kind of money. You actually come out ahead more than the $200. You know, if you're just thinking about it from the money point of view, maybe there's actually more in it for you than just that. And the likely consequences, right? What's likely to happen if you do nothing? Well,
They don't know this.
No, when your lease is up, they're gonna notice. They're gonna file delinquency charges, and they're gonna put that in your rental credit, and it's gonna affect you. And they're gonna come after you for that money, regardless.
certainly could. Could be on your credit report, and you'd argue with them, but it'd be there. And now you're fighting it, and you're paying more for
Yeah.
your college loans and car loans and all that kind of stuff. Could happen, right? So, yeah, there's the money, but there's other things that can happen just because of that. And so you estimate all these different things. So what's the ethical thing to do? So I'll ask you.
Well, we discussed that. I think we should just tell the management.
Sorry. I don't know why that's doing that.
We should inform the management to avoid trouble because, you know, like she said, I agree that it wouldn't be unfair to just get $200 for free on your bill, and somebody else that probably has problems in her life doesn't get that from a, like, you know.
So it's sticky, right? Think, well, yeah, why wouldn't anybody take the $200? Just, you know, not their mistake, not mine. Some big faceless company, who cares, right? Yeah, maybe so, but maybe not. You know, maybe that manager's taking it, maybe they're having to pay for that. Maybe they get fired over it. Do you really feel good about getting that person fired over some mistake that you didn't bring up? You know, so maybe it does affect the landlord. It affects their own livelihood because they're missing out. They end up screwing up the rent. Messes up your own credit. It's possible, you know, so it's not always black and white. And yeah, it's not just saying you always have to give the money back. No, maybe not. You know, things happen in your favor sometimes and you just roll with it. It's not necessarily unethical for sure, but it's not always necessarily great just to shut up and quietly take your money too. So that's why we got to talk about some things like this. And different people might feel differently in the room. We just have different sets of values about some of these things. So let's see. This one ought to be interesting. And by the way, the Michigan one, the one with the MBA, that really happened. That was a real life scenario. And actually, I know of two examples that happened. That happened in Houston recently with the director of Metro. Same thing. She'd been lying on her educational attainment, and so she's no longer with Metro. So they do involve judgment. That's why we have this little guide, so that you're going to have an ethical dilemma come up the next week probably. And so hopefully you have this thing laying around and remember to take a picture of it on your phone. Because you have to think about it. And so it's not like, sometimes there's more steps than you would think about. And then can you separate personal ethics from business ethics? My opinion is no. I mean, if you're personally kind of a sleazebag, you're going to operate the same way in business and vice versa. And so when we look at clients, sometimes the only decision we can make to protect ourselves is not take that client on. Because really from that point out, it's all downhill. And so we spend a lot of time on that because, again, you can make a little money, but it may not be worth it to you. Fortunately for us, our biggest client is still like less than 5% of our revenues, which is another risk management point of view, because that way, if I need to tell no to a client, I can do that. It helps that it doesn't hurt. Again, the framework is there to use for that. So, just a little quote about it. I'll let you guys have a good day.